This section is about the game engine in Blender. It's not exactly the most advanced game engine in the world, but it's really fun to use and super fast at making prototypes and demos. Let's open up the blend file called gamestart.blend. We have a little maze here. Now the game engine has an entirely different set of buttons that are hidden initially. You can enable these buttons from the menu up top. So click on that and change it from Blender Render to Blender Game. And immediately you'll see some new buttons appear over here in the render window. And there's lots of other game-related buttons in a lot of other windows too. If you mouse over the 3D view and press the P key, this begins the game. You can press Escape to stop the game. You can play your game even in wireframe view like we are now. So let's go into camera view. Press Alt and Z for textured shaded view. So this is what our maze looks like from the camera view. Press the P key, and this is real time right here. This is our game. But you can press as many keys as you want. Nothing's working right now because we haven't added any controls. But first I'm going to show you around the scene a little bit, so you know what our goal is going to be in the end. So here's our maze. It has two main paths. You start down here, you can go forward and then left to a dead end, or you can go right to this final chamber here, which is going to be the goal of the game, the goal of the maze, to make it to this chamber. But if we zoom in down there, you'll see there's a door. And this is a locked door, so we're going to need to find a key for it. We're going to add controls that let us roam the maze, collect the key, and use it on this locked door to enter that final chamber. It's nothing too fancy, but I'll teach you the basics of making a game with Blender. So there's our door at the end of one pathway, and our key is at the dead end in the other path. So as the main character, you're going to roam through the maze, pick up those keys, trek all the way back to this door over here, and when you collide with the door is going to open up and take you to the final chamber here. That's the goal. Again, it's nothing too complex. Just going to show you the fundamentals of adding game controls and opening doors with keys. Now just a few quick notes on game graphics. With the Blender game buttons enabled in the top header, you get different shading options over here in the render buttons for single texture, multi-texture, and GLSL. You can find these same options in the side toolbar here under the shading options. This is where we learn to enable GLSL. So these options change the way the 3D view looks. We're going to stick with GLSL for our game graphics as it's the best quality. The other two options are for speed. They'll run a lot faster but don't allow for complex materials. So here's what single texture looks like in the game after I press P over the 3D view. It will run a lot faster, but the materials have been simplified. So let's turn GLSL back on. Now the general rule for creating graphics for your game is that you get what you see in the 3D view. So whatever your objects look like in texture view in the 3D view with GLSL enabled, they'll look exactly like that in the game as well. So our maze here in the 3D view looks exactly the same as that in the game when I press P over the 3D view. So here's the game, looks exactly the same as the 3D view. So whatever you make, it'll look the same in the game as it does in textured view. And now that we got all the introduction out of the way, let's move on to the next chapter and start adding controls for the game.